science fiction panel here at Dragonsteel. So I'll have everybody introduce themselves here in a second. Excited to be here. Howard, we'll start with you.
My name's Howard Taylor. If you recognize my voice, it's because I was very often, like almost every episode, not that smart on writing excuses. That's what everybody knows me for. I write and illustrate Schlock Mercenary. I do a bunch of other things, and I despise the sound of my own voice, but I love making you listen to it.
My name is Nick Bright. I'm a reader, writer, science fiction. I am the founder and co-host of the podcast called Just Keep Writing. Been knowing Howard for a while now. Met through the Writing Excuses tour there, the retreat.
Awesome. I'm Michael Mortenson. I am a sci-fi author. My books are science fiction haiku. So that's my angle here.
Love it.
Is it science fiction haiku?
Yes. So they're haiku with science fiction themes.
Love it. We will have a Q&A session here at the end, so please hold all the questions to the very end. In case of an emergency, please flag us down. So let's get started into this. Obviously, you two come from a totally different background. I want to get started in talking about the medium first, though. Howard, how do you approach science fiction as a cartoon, as an illustrator?
I've been reading science fiction since forever ago, 1983 probably, and I was always attracted to the sense of wonder. But it wasn't until season 11 of Writing Excuses, which I think is around 2015, 2016, where we talked about the elemental genres and started picking apart science fiction to say, well, what is not what puts it on a bookshelf under science fiction, but what is it that makes us keep turning pages when we picked up science fiction? And the answers were manifold, but sense of wonder topped the list. And so, as an illustrator, it's not enough to say, oh, we are on, and I'll cite a classic, oh, we are on the Ring World. When Niven describes Ring World, the people who don't know they're living on a ring talk about the ring as the arch, because you have this horizon that it's not really a horizon, it just fades into haze in the distance, and then this brightly lit ribbon which runs over your head and back down to the other side of the world. And so for all you know, you are living on a thing that's hanging under an arch. As an illustrator, I want to be able to evoke the sense of wonder that you get when you imagine that picture, which is really difficult because your imagination's way better than any picture I can draw.
Michael?
Okay. So my journey to this place was that I did not like sci-fi as a kid. I know. Tragic. I think that I didn't understand the difference between what was real and what wasn't real in sci-fi. So I felt very safe in fantasy because it was all magic. But in sci-fi, I wasn't sure, are there killer robots? Are there giant superbugs that are going to wipe out the planet? Lots of the things in sci-fi scared me as a kid. But then I got really into science. I ended up getting a master's degree in physics. So I've been through a little bit of science, and I love it. And today, I love getting to blend that powerful science and the rules that make our world work with the imagination. And so that is kind of how I came to sci-fi. How I came to sci-fi haiku is that there was a contest. And so I started writing, and I kept writing, and then I was still writing, and here I am. So,
love it. I have a love-hate relationship with science fiction. Which brings us to our next question on as to why. What's the roles of hard science fiction versus soft science fiction, right? So I don't like hard science fiction. I don't know why. I just don't. It doesn't gel with me. I love magic. So with the softer science fictions, I can really get into that, really right into it and stuff like that. For you guys, what's harder for you when you have to have an ultimate rule, knowing that if you get this wrong, someone's going to tear you apart on Twitter? Or if you get it right, you're going to be applauded to be smarter than you actually are?
I'm so often applauded for being smarter than I actually am. That's anybody who thinks I'm even moderately clever has overestimated me by an order of magnitude. I'm going to go back to the elemental genres for a moment because, I used to delimit things by like hard sci-fi, soft sci-fi. But the elemental genres taught me that, if you have the elemental genre of mystery, well, what is a mystery? Well, okay, I'm trying to solve a problem. I'm trying to solve a puzzle. What is a romance? Where I'm following a relationship between two people. One of the things that we learned in that elemental genres season of Writing Excuses is that a romance and a buddy cop movie are the same thing. They are fundamentally the same thing. We are exploring the relationship between two people, and we get our happily ever after when the two people come together, either to make love and make babies, or make murder and kill all the bad guys.
You're not wrong.
I know I'm not
You're not wrong.
Nobody's laughing because they're like, oh my God, that might be true. So coming back to science fiction, I said coming back to science fiction. Let's look at Captain America Winter Soldier. It's a superhero movie, but it's a spy thriller.
Yep.
When Captain America jumps out of the back of the airplane with no parachute in one of our opening scenes, and I didn't realize this until I watched like a bunch of James Bond movies because Prime told me they were going away, and I thought, I need to see these. I was wrong. Just so we're clear, there are so many intense climactic moments of jumping out of airplanes with no parachute or a fancy glider or a jeep or whatever, and Captain America Winter Soldier puts paid on all of that with no dramatic music, just who has time to date? Doot, 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 out of the airplane. Did he have a parachute? No. And seeing that in the context of everything else, I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, the syntax of spy movie has this verb, if you will, this word, this meme of jump out of an airplane in peril. So coming back to science fiction, what is difficult for me? Absolutely nothing. Because the framework of science fiction is such that if I want to tell a mystery story in science fiction, it might be hard sci-fi, where we're trying to solve a chemistry puzzle or whatever. Andy Weir's The Martian is my high bar for hard science fiction. The book, my stake in the ground, best hard science fiction novel ever. Others came first, but that one's amazing. The movie, really, really good, but it'll never clear the bar that the book set. But that's one where we have multiple puzzles to solve. It's kind of like a mystery. Is there a sense of wonder? Not really. Stuck on Mars? That's not wondrous. That's terrifying.
I don't gel well with that book.
He's sorry.
And that's fine. You don't have to. And that's what I love about the elemental approach to these is that what kind of a story do I want to tell? Well, if I want to do sense of wonder, and if you look at Schlock Mercenary, space opera, we're going to go to lots of different locations. Coming back to James Bond real quick, James Bond goes to lots of different locations. Why are these things similar? Well, because readers, viewers like to be taken places. And so I'll ask myself, what kind of a story do I want to tell? And once I have that, I got a 30-year deep toolbox of things. And once I've made the early decisions, everything after that is just a soup recipe.
Yeah.
Nice. So, I do have a soft spot in my heart for hard science fiction. And The Martian is amazing. The follow-up book that he wrote, what is it called? Project Hail Mary. So good. And I think the thing that makes that work, I also read Three Body Problem, which is another hard sci-fi, right? And I like one more than the other. Three Body Problem is a fantastic kind of mind-bending book where you throw all of these ideas that should really each have their own book into one book. And it's fun, but you get the sense that the author really just wanted to share cool ideas. When you read something from Andy Weir, for example, you get that he wanted to tell a story. And he thought, it would be cool if we included these fun science things. And so I think for me, reading hard science fiction becomes enjoyable when I know that the author is both telling a story and fundamentally telling a story, but then has the skill to say, we're going to talk about some physics here. Let's talk some kinematics. Let's talk some biology, whatever science. And it just adds a little extra life into it for me. Whereas some people, it sucks the life right out. They're like, I did not read this book to come to high school physics class. That is not my goal in reading a book. And that's totally fine if that's you.
Oh my gosh, I can make air out of hydrazine?
I do want to hear what Nick thinks. He's smiling big.
That's me. I don't know what it is. Hard science fiction is harder for me, but I have found success in certain reasons and things like that. So one of my favorite sci-fi books is S.B. Divia's Machine Hood. I cater and I like what problem are you trying to solve more than anything else, especially with science fiction, because if you look at a problem that you're trying to solve, you can add any element that you want to that. You can borrow from science fiction, romance, buddy cop team-ups, right? So that book for me is really where I'm after. Toshi Yamaguchi's War Girls, love it. Just what you can do in those sets of stories on problem solving is really what appeals to me when it comes to science fiction, is thinking outside the box, but in a way that you can have it relatable to other genres and things like that. Now, reading and writing science fiction, hard science fiction or soft, there's research that has to go into this. As a writer,
can we survey the audience real quick? How many of you here because you want book recommendations because you want to read some good sci-fi? Hands, a few hands up. Okay, how many here because you want to write amazing science fiction? Okay, a lot more hands. I say a lot more. You raised them more enthusiastically. A little more emphasis there. All right, so.
Okay, well, this is a good question for research. Howard, how much research do you put into a piece before you start?
Oh God.
Do we go with the iceberg theory?
All right, no. Let me give you an example. I did a kind of a throwaway joke at the beginning of book 19, A Function of Firepower in Schlock Mercenary. Kind of a throwaway joke where there were dinosaurs. There were sapient dinosaurs when the rock hit, and they got rescued because they hurried up and invented radio, and there was a hyperspace probe nearby, and the people whose spaceship disturbed the system millions of years ago felt a little guilty and came and rescued them. It was kind of a throwaway joke. Well, I thought I'd do a bonus story for that book collection, and I started doing homework. What did Earth look like 66 million years ago? Well, a couple of things. North and South America weren't connected yet. India was an island. There were no Himalayas yet. And I cannot stress this enough, India was on fire. The Deccan traps were active for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years. Deccan means southern, traps means staircase. And it's a term that geologists use to describe you can tell I've done some research. Yeah. I did not know this before I started. It means there was a continental basaltic flow, which at one point covered maybe half of the land mass that we think of now as India, because India, just hustling across the now gone forever Tethys Sea, went over the reunion hotspot, reunion not because we're all getting together again, but because that's the name of an island, volcanic island, that sits on the hotspot. Went over the reunion hotspot and melted. There's so much volcanism. And I put out a call to Twitter. I'm like, so just prior to the rock hitting, I say Twitter, Blue Sky, put out a call to the Blues and said, so prior to the rock hitting, India's on fire and it's an island. What's the weather like? Because I assume everything within a few thousand kilometers, we've got hurricanes made out of acid rain and ash. But India's in the southern hemisphere, and it's, the rock's going to hit on the other side of the planet. What's the weather like over here? Because, and I'm bringing it back around to, I'm doing all this research in order to tell a story. I wanted to draw a picture of India on fire as seen from orbit. And I wanted to have a story in which the sapient dinosaurs living in North America are receiving refugees from across the ocean. Because that's kind of a cool thing. We have a friggin' climate crisis caused by massive volcanism on one side of the planet. And so a little bit of homework. The thing that I discovered that was weird is that there's lots of writing about, yes, the Deccan traps, and this was the period of time, and this is the extent of the lava flows, and activity here, and activity. Pages and pages and pages, and then you have the continental drift folks who are saying, yes, India was moving very, very quickly, and North and South America are slowly moving together. South America is moving away from Africa, and nobody is saying India was an island and it was on fire. How come none of these people are putting that together? That shouldn't be my job. It certainly shouldn't be my job to educate the general public by putting it in a comic book, but I'm going to.
Bless you.
So when you ask about research, I probably spent 3 or 4 days just reading up on this with giddy glee as I discover more and more things. Can you see volcanic lava from orbit? Yes, you can. I got photos for color reference because the internet is wonderful. How long is the story going to be? 13 pages.
Yeah, sounds about right.
So yeah, a lot of research for not a lot of content.
I want you to go next, Nick.
Okay.
I want to hear your take.
Yeah, so it really depends on what kind of story I'm trying to tell and how far into the future I'm writing. So so former military, did infantry for 5 years in the Army, so a lot of what I write is centered around military veterans and what we struggle with through PTSD, loss of limbs, and things like that. So I went into a tangent for about a month on prosthetics. Because there might be a character one day in my current book that might have a prosthetic that I needed to explain. So research for me, it's really key. I think it is determined on how far into the future it is, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you two, but the further out it is, the more of the magic you can kind of do a little bit if it's not current technology. John Scalzi's Interdependency series made me do so much research on how people migrated across the earth. Wondering, okay, who got the technology first and how did things follow? How do they interact with each other and things like that? I think that's a huge thing to look at is how far into the future that you're trying to write for or read for, right? And going back to know how much knowledge you need to obtain. Because obviously you're going to get so much more knowledge than you actually put in. I think I've researched 3 or 4 days on some stuff and then put 2 sentences about it just to make sure it had the right message and sayings that convey, hey, this is right.
Awesome. So I'll talk about poetry for a minute, if that's all right. Poetry is not something you usually research. That sounds very odd to say out loud. Like, I'm researching for poetry. But when I approach creating a sci-fi haiku book, each chapter has a theme. And it's either telling a story or it's kind of about a subgenre. And there is a chapter called Hard Science Fiction. And in that chapter, I just went out and I kind of combed Wikipedia for all of the physics ideas, Newton's laws, things that people would know, but maybe need to refresher on. A couple things from like optics, or some things from my engineering, like Hooke's law. This is how springs move and displace. And I took those ideas and I said, okay, if we have this, written out, anything that is acted upon by an external force is going to have an equal and opposite reaction. You have these laws, right? How can I turn that into poetry? And so I started saying, okay, let's anthropomorphize it. Let's talk about, if chemical bonds were relationships, how would they talk to each other, And I took it from this space of very hard rules and statements that are pretty dry into a more human, sometimes humorous, sometimes dramatic setting. And that was how I went to create poetry in a hard science fiction setting. And I'm also working on a novel which has lots of sci-fi elements in it. It takes place underwater, and so I did a bunch of research about what could you do underwater. Light, unfortunately, doesn't go very deep in the ocean, and so I had to make a decision, is this something that I'm going to include in my story, or am I just going to fudge that, like, this is a really clear, calm place in the ocean where the light just gets through. Exactly,
all that cave algae from the dungeons that's providing illumination. Yeah, we've got glowing seaweeds.
It's just evolution.
Yeah,
I can see now.
yeah, and the book's not finalized. I'm on draft 3, so anything could change. We could have glowing seaweed, but I was able to say, okay, here's what would physically be possible. What's going to help me tell the story? And I'm telling the story to a YA audience, so how much are YA audiences going to care about different things? And so I chose to hold hard to certain scientific principles and not to others, which as a writer is a choice you have to make. And I think it's really powerful to have beta readers read through your stuff. And if they're getting hung up on certain things, especially if you're writing something with a hard science fiction bent, your beta readers will be able to say, this is bothering me. Or they won't even notice, and if they don't notice, you've done a good job.
Speaking of beta readers, show of hands, who has DNF'd or did not finish a book because it explained too much and had too much word vomit? Okay, so that's huge problems at times, right? How do you guys make sure that you give just enough to get your imagination, the thought through, versus not doing too much where you're going to make readers run? Beta readers is a big thing for that, I think, for myself. I don't know. That's a hard one for me just because I don't do a lot of hard science fiction where I have to explain a lot.
It's easy in a haiku. You only have 17 syllables, so
cheating much?
I mean, it's the form, right? It's the form.
I'm looking for an answer that's useful because it's become reflex for me.
Yeah.
I do a lot of exposition to myself before I start the story. The narrator boxes for the story I'm doing about the dinosaurs radioing for help. We have a picture of Earth from orbit, and then the narrator just has a few short sentences. Earth, 66 million years ago. India is an island, and it is on fire. Nobody calls it India, of course. They just try to get as far away from it as they can. Things are much nicer in the opposite hemisphere. And then we have another picture of Earth. Okay? And that's enough narration to tell the story. And then because it's a schlock mercenary story, there has to be a punchline. The narrator gets the last line down at the bottom. Things are much nicer in the opposite hemisphere. For now. Things are much nicer for now. Because everybody kind of knows at this point that a rock is coming. That's part of the I don't have to tell my audience that an asteroid is widely believed to have been responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs. Especially since in the main body of the book I make reference to that. And so that's a piece of exposition that I thought about and then I discarded because I know people already have that piece. There are times when people don't have that piece and a beta reader will very quickly let you know, oh, wait, that means this? Of course that means that. Don't you understand the concept of electron shells in, classical chemistry? Sorry. Okay, let's go back to hydrazine, and everybody's eyes glaze over, except mine. It's not something that I find difficult because if it's important to the story, then it's important to a character. And if it's important to a character, they're going to talk about it. But they're not going to explain it. They're going to react around it in their dialogue. And once that natural sort of thing happens, I love writing that kind of dialogue because we all have different understandings of things. And if two people are arguing about how much of India is covered with lava, well, that's exposition right there.
Yeah, that's actually a really good tool. There is the concept, right? Show, don't tell. That is I think, for me, I'm dialogue heavy first in all my first drafts. I tell a lot through my characters interacting with each other and things like that, which is not a benefit at always, because then you have to go back through and do some exposition. But that is an exercise. If you can have two characters talk, and they can figure it out amongst each other and explain it with each other, that's about the right amount of detail you're going to need as well.
And it's even better if those characters are in conflict about the point, so that this isn't just one note. It's not just, it's not, there's no risk of maid and butler dialogue.
Yeah.
This is, these people, their relationship depends on knowing how much lava there is. I don't know why that would happen. This is your job.
A good example of this is This Is How You Lose the Time War.
Yes.
Love that book. Can't name the author right now. I know it's Amal.
Max Gladstone and Amal El-Matar.
That's why we bring you. Yeah, it's a really good book. We've covered that on our show before on our podcast, and the dynamic between the two, and they're talking, and they're, it's. No, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the way they talk, the way they interact, you start understanding the world that way, and you start understanding some of the science behind what they're going through and things like that.
Cool. I don't know that I have much to add to that. That was real good.
No, you're good. Okay.
We're supposed to end at 20 till. Is that
Sure.
okay? I'm wondering how much time we need for Q&A.
Yeah. Is it 40? Okay.
Raise of hands. Who wants to ask a question? Oh, okay, we need no time, we can just keep talking. No, all right, I'll give you another chance.
There's a question here.
How many of you how many of you are going to want to ask a question? Get it up high so I can see. All right, we got a few questions. You're in charge here, Nick. I'm going
to ask one more question just because I do think it's an important one when it comes to reading and writing science fiction, right? How much social commentary do you put into our current world, into your works in science fiction?
Schlock Mercenary is fundamentally social satire. So lots, but you might not see it.
That's a difficult question to ask. I haven't written anything that's super far future, that's longer than a haiku. So,
but you are writing a novel.
I am writing a novel, and it's near future. So it's theoretically it could be happening now. So. And it's YA, so it's not as much social, it's more local relationships.
Got it, okay. I put a ton in mine, so.
Awesome.
Again, I go with problem solvings, right? So what are current problems that we're facing today? What does it look like in the future? What if it looks like with this? And I think for me, it really helps out in a world building aspect, right? To start looking through the lens of someone else. Someone who doesn't look like you, talk like you, think like you, act like you. I think with that type of aspect, when we're doing world building and things like that, and having social commentary, you get a lot more viewpoints that you can talk from and look at in trying to solve the said problem.
So let's take some questions.
Yeah. Microphone is up here to the left. if you guys just
If you want to be
comment
heard
on
by anybody, if you just
That's
want to pray your question to us, we'll pray the answer back, and no one will be edified.
Hello.
Hi.
I admittedly don't read a lot of sci-fi, so my question is for people just getting into the genre, what sci-fi books specifically like made you all fall in love with sci-fi?
Oh, that's a good question. I have a follow-up question for you.
Oh no. Yes.
What do you currently love?
Oh god. I read a lot of Brandon Sanderson. I know that's a shock. And probably romance are my main two things. Right?
I would look for collections of science fiction short stories because those tend to be explorations of ideas and themes, and in reading short stories, you will likely find voices that just resonate with you. Like, I want to read more from this person, and so you go look for more of that person. A lot of the sci-fi that I grew up with is 50 years out of date. It was already old when I was reading it, so I'm not actually going to drop those titles.
I don't know if this is a good beginner one, but it is a sci-fi romance by Constance Faye called Calamity. Fiasco just came out recently as well. Romance is the alumni too. That's a good one for romance and science fiction together.
Great. Thank you very much.
I want to give you options. So if you're okay with Big Chonky Brandon Sanderson, you might be okay with Big Chonky Dune.
I did see the movie.
That will help with it a little bit. So if you're ready to just I want to go epic.
She read
That's where we go. Okay.
I did read Project Hail. I dabble in a little bit. I'm a
Okay.
librarian, so I dabble in a little bit of everything, but not as much sci-fi.
And
All right, give it up for the librarian, everybody.
And the other one I would say is any Ray Bradbury short story. Like The Sound of Thunder, start there.
Thank you.
Hi guys, thank you so much. Your panel has been so incredibly inspiring. I want to ask, what would be your number one piece of advice you would give to your younger self when you were writing your first book?
I am my younger self. I don't know.
Oh man, that's a difficult one because younger me versus me now after military, or I have multiple versions I could tell myself now.
Like that very first draft.
If I knew then what I know now, if I knew about what I know now, not actually know it, but if I knew about it, I would panic and quit within 12 hours. Okay? So, my rule number one, if I have a time traveling ability to communicate with me, is don't. I was the poster child for Dunning-Kruger, and if I had known better, I wouldn't have kept going. So,
I think what I would tell my younger self, the first draft version of me, is don't be afraid to bleed on the page because it's therapy.
That's good. I'm going to attempt to tell my much younger self that now I'm out of things to say to my younger self. I would say that it's okay to not write the thing that you think everybody wants to read.
Yep.
Wow, thank you guys so much.
Of course, thanks for the question.
I wanted your suggestions on time travel books.
Ooh. I have a haiku for you. So this is the haiku that's on the back of the book, and it's one of my favorites. It says, "Since tomorrow, I've been fixing the time machine, just like yesterday." Thank you. But you wanted an answer, right?
I have a favorite. I would love to.
I I go back to This Is How You Lose Time War.
Yeah, This Is How You Lose Time War. There's one by, who was the guy who wrote the Robots novels, or the Giants novels? Not the Robots, that's Asimov. The Giants novels. McDonald? No. Gosh darn it.
I know it, I can't look it up.
Anyway, it's a World War II time story, and I'm just going to look it up and shout the answer for you in the middle of someone else's question.
I had a question about kind of authorial voice in sci-fi versus fantasy. A lot of the panels I've been to this week, they talked about kind of trying to remain neutral and not really have a pointed, this is what the author thinks about how this should work or not. When you're working with hard sci-fi, perhaps, where there is an answer, does that authorial voice safely come through? Or is it still, let's be neutral, we're writing a story, even though there's a very clear answer?
Currently, we are working on a series of shows on my podcast called Writing is Political. It's a concept where years ago I said I don't write politics in my books. This is the most false thing anybody has ever said, because anything you say and do, someone else disagrees with you for whatever reason, therefore we have politics. So when it comes to like that, I would say this is really about what kind of narrator do you want? Do you want an unreliable narrator who's actively saying something to trick everybody? Like, do you want POV, first person, who's you're understanding everything through their lens? So I would divert to that on that one, and I just think getting the facts right is going to be the biggest thing to make the authority piece work.
Yeah, your voice matters. I would not hide your voice. James P. Hogan, Thrice Upon a Time, and The Proteus Operation. 2 for the price of 1 Google.
So I've heard that it has been said that fantasy and sci-fi are just the exact same story with a different aesthetic. I, however, am unsure, and I feel like there could be more or less to that. What are your thoughts?
This is a good question. I think Brandon is kind of breaking down some of these barriers as he moves forward into the future of the Cosmo. But I think there are some differences. I think it's fair to say that, you know, a fantasy book is probably not going to be the place where you get thrilling physics insights, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah, Larry Niven tore that wall down 50 years ago with Flight of the Horse. Far-flung future, somebody creates a time machine, and Svet, I think is our protagonist's name, is repeatedly sent back in time to get extinct animals. And he's sent back to get a horse and returns with a unicorn. Why? Because there's no such thing as time travel. If there's time travel in your stupid science fiction book, it's a fantasy book. Niven was just telling that joke. And fundamentally, Flight of the Horse works as science fiction, and it works as a nod to fantasy. Fundamentally, both of those, science fiction and fantasy, fall into what the literati of the 1930s to 1950s would have called romance.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's romantic, but they are romances. Lord of the Rings was first described as a romance. So if you're trying to, if you're saying they're the same story, well, no, they're not. Every book is different. That's silly. Mm-hmm. If you're saying that they're the same genre, they are children of the same parent genre, which is the romantic speculation upon ideas.
Thank you.
God, that's going to end up on Wikipedia. And then I'm going to get death threats.
Why do you think I'm not answering?
So I have a
question kind of related back to time travel, where I feel like some stories, some authors try to add it in and it just falls flat, it doesn't work, and I feel like it pulls you out of the story completely. And I was wondering if there's like other themes that kind of do the same thing for you guys.
Okay, if you have a post-apocalyptic story where all the lights have gone out, you've lost me, because I can buy solar yard lights at Walmart for $1, and they will recharge the batteries that are in them that I can then put in other things. And so, yeah, science fiction that doesn't take into account the subtle changes of the landscape always throws me off. Connie Willis did a brilliant set of books in which a portion of the drama of the books was people running around trying to find their professor to talk to them. Like, guys, nobody in this book is carrying any sort of a phone. What happened? And so, it's not just time travel. I'm going to come back to Captain America jumping out of the airplane, okay? If you're going to put a tired theme into your story, you need to put a spin on it where, in the context of everybody else having told that theme, people will look at what you did and say, oh, yeah, that's... You just played it cool and jumped out of the plane with no chute. No dramatic music, we just did it.
I would add that anytime... So it's not consistent for me. For me, it's when the build-up is just kind of magicked away with physics or some other science. That's when it breaks for me. Especially, like, we've been talking about Andy Weir. He establishes very upfront, like, here are the set of science principles we're going to be using throughout the book. Just like Brandon sets up a magic system. And then those are used to build the solutions to the problems, right? It's not that they come out of left field and you have sophons taking over the world. So, that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, for me, it's when you take somebody else's culture and code it as something else, evil. That is, like, it happens so much, and it's literally the reason why I put things down, in any genre, really, but in science fiction I find that to be one of the things where they'll make an alien culture, but you're like, no, this is my wife's family, like, what's going on, and so that's where, like, you do research on that and stuff like that, but I put down all the time when it comes to culture issues and things like that.
Thank you.
Buck Rogers, the bad guys were the Mongols.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
My question is, with a little bit of preface here. It's a common thing for writers and even just any creator to look back on any work of theirs previously that they've done and just look at it a little bit with disdain or just like, sort of feeling. So, yeah, my question is there anything that you've actually written, done in general, primarily writing, of course, considering where we're at, that you've written that you look back on actually fondly, like you look back on, oh, I did this? Nice.
Now we're silent. That's not a good thing.
Art is never finished, it's only abandoned. I think that's Picasso. I'm not sure if it's Picasso, but I like the quote. I wrote a nonfiction essay for Altered Perceptions, which was the Robinson Wells anthology several years back, a benefit anthology. Creative nonfiction piece called No, I'm Fine, which is a 750-word, I think, tour of my brain when I'm having a mental health episode. And Schlock Mercenary Book 18, which we're just getting back from the printer soon, but which you can read online for free, which explores found family and culture clashes in ways that continue to resonate with me, where I will go back and I will read it and think, yeah, I did a lot of things wrong, and that picture just sucks, but the story still makes me cry, so I'll take it.
I wrote a short story in college called Chicken Coup, about a chicken that can electrocute other chickens and people, and it takes over the chicken coop and causes mayhem. And I look back on that with a lot of fond cringe.
We'll take one more question and then we're out of time. We'll make our answers real quick here.
All right. My question is, with a lot of science fiction, it's very educational, whether that's about the Martian and
hydrazine.
Yeah.
Potatoes.
Do you think that that could be done with fantasy, or would trying to do it in fantasy just make it science fiction?
Yeah. I don't know how else to answer that besides yeah, because look at all the herbal medicines that are out there. You can throw that into fantasy, right? Look at just care of a wound that military soldiers use and things like that. How do you field dress things? How do you skin an animal? How do you hunt, gather, survive? I think there's a lot that goes into it. It depends on what you're trying to teach and what you want your audience to learn. You're going to learn different things. They're not same. But in the confines of the genre, you can teach and you can implement things there, and you can learn from those things. And again, I'll go back, I've said it quite a few times, there's a whole social construct in every world that you build. You can teach through that and things like that, which I find the most fascinating.
You said educational, and depending on the tone you use when you ask that question, you may mean educational, you may mean didactic. You may mean, oh, this book is trying to teach me a thing. This book exists to teach me a thing. That's not why I read fiction. But if I never learn anything from the stories that I read, if I never say anything worth learning in the stories that I write, then I have failed on multiple counts. Fantasy, science fiction, romance, spy thrillers, anything, if it doesn't teach you something about good human behavior, how to react in an argument, and bad human behavior, well, then it's failed and it won't feel real. And so there's any number of things that can be taught. We joke a lot about the fantasy horse, which is often just a motorcycle, only it's got legs, and we never worry about taking care of the horse. Well, if you spend 10 minutes, writing about taking care of the horse, well, you've said something to your reader, and they now understand that a horse is not a four-legged motorcycle.
I often insert characters cooking meals with actual recipes.
Oh, yeah.
They got to eat. It's awesome. So, we are out of time. Thank you guys for showing up.
You're awesome. Thank you.
If you guys have any further questions, we'll be standing over off to the side and things like that.